So this is the new gap in the door, and it's a lot bigger than I would like. I can get my finger in that gap. And it gets narrower down this way until it's almost okay in this spot here. But then there's a gap down here at the corner. And another smaller one at the other side. And there, at the bottom, I've already ground through some of the glass that I used to close in the edge of the core, and it's still tight. So I'm going to need to grind off some more there. So here I'm marking places where I need to grind some more. And after the grind, I'm going to use wax paper as a release agent. And first I'm taping some down to the floor. And now I'm just going to kind of see how this is going to work out. The door and the bulkhead are on the floor, and the wax paper will let that separate. And to see the spacing where the door will wind up, I'm putting the hinges in place just temporarily. And this is the next day. And I'm going to wrap the door in wax paper as well. I'm going to put some filler that's going to bond to the bulkhead at the edge of the door, but I don't want it to bond to the garage floor or the door itself. And here I'm cutting away the fiberglass strip that I closed in that edge on the bulkhead because I want the filler to actually go into the core a little bit and bond better so it's not going to fall off. And I don't have an air compressor here, but this little turbo thing is almost as good for getting rid of dust and stuff and debris that I don't want in my fiberglass. So here I'm setting the door in place and putting the hinges back in to get the spacing more or less the way it's going to be when the door is done. And this is my filler. Great stuff, big gap filler. And any of the spray foams would work for this, but I use the big gap filler because it will harden in a large mass if you have to like fill in a thick spot. And a lot of the other spray foams kind of need the humidity in the air to harden, and so the center of a big mass won't harden. And since I only used a little bit, I'm going to save the rest of the can. I've got some acetone in a syringe, and I can use that to dissolve the rest of the foam. If you get it before it hardens, you can dissolve it with acetone like this and save the rest of the can for another time. Otherwise, normally it hardens right there in the nozzle from the can, and then you can't get any more out. It's ruined. So I'm using a razor knife now to cut off any of the foam that's sticking up. This is the next day, so the foam has hardened by now. And now I can separate the pieces. And there's always a little bit of flash, like the stuff that squirts out like in the gap. And there's some here where it went between that wax paper on the floor and the door. So I'm trimming that with a razor knife. You need a sharp blade. I just replaced this blade. So instead of tearing, it actually just cuts cleanly. And I would have a lot less tear out on the rest of it if I had put a fresh blade in to start with. Yeah, that's more like it. That goes so much easier. And there were a couple ways that I could close this off with fiberglass. I'm going to be lazy and try and lay a piece all the way around the edge, and so it needs to be a little bit curved for the glass to go around the edge. It really won't work with a right angled bend. So this is what the gap looks like right now. It's not bad. It's not perfect by any means, but it's a lot better than it was. And because that edge was sanded into a curve, I can just lay one big piece of fiberglass all the way around the edge here, and then I'll lay a little bit more of those little strips to kind of square off that edge before finishing up. And here I'm fixing the places where I ground off the edging when I was making the door fit. So I've ground through into the core in this spot, so I'm going to fix that as well. And now that that has hardened, I've marked spots that were still a little bit low, and I'm putting in some little pieces of chopped strand mat to build that up, you know, just a tiny 1/16 of an inch at a time or whatever, before laying a strip along the full length here. And the strip will be fairly flat, right, as opposed to the curved edge that I had before. And once I fill in along the edge of that, I'll be back to pretty much like a square corner there. And a few layers took care of that, and now I'm, instead of sanding that edging off and then fixing the gaps at the edge, I decided to skip a step, and I've got thickened resin with some finely milled fibers in it, and I'm just going along and filling in that edge behind the strip of chopped strand mat that I have, and that will complete the squaring off of that edge as well as sealing any little gaps along the edge. And once I've done that, now I can sand off the glass that goes beyond the edge and any excess of that filler that I put in. Sanding this stuff off makes a really nice edge. The sander can be flat with the surface on either side, and so anything from the edge that sticks past gets sanded off, and it makes a real nice clean right angle edge there. And now once again I can test the fit of the door. And it almost drops right in. There's some of the places that I built up at the edge are just a little bit high, so I'm gonna sand just a little bit in some places that I marked, and the door should, after a few adjustments, fit pretty good. The hinge side was good because I made that straight to begin with, but the gaps are not bad. It's not perfect by any means, but it's a lot better than it was. So the next time I get back to this, I'll be able to put in the hinges, and after that, the doorknob.